Boldwood presents Fireworks at Pennycress Inn, written by Sarah Hope and read by Sophie McCall. Chapter 1. Polly Burrows pulled the sleeve of her chunky jumper over her hand before using it to wipe the condensation from the window of the taxi. "Are we almost there?" "Almost, miss. Just another mile or so." The taxi driver glanced at her as she sat in the back seat, his broad grin revealing a missing front tooth. "Great." Smiling, she watched the tree line to their left give way to fields and squashed the desire to squeal. The excitement bubbling beneath the surface she'd felt ever since Mr. Bob had promised her this job, and the impending promotion it would lead to, threatened to overspill. "You look happy there, miss. Not that I blame you. It's lovely around these parts. Mine and the wife's happy place it is. Can't beat the Cotswolds for a romantic getaway, can you?" The taxi driver looked in his rear-view mirror. Shaking her head slightly, it took Polly a few seconds to catch up with the conversation. A romantic getaway? Now, that's something she wouldn't know the first thing about. Not that she was about to admit it, especially to someone she'd only met 15 minutes ago at Stratford-upon-Avon's train station. No, it definitely can't be beaten for a romantic getaway. "So, who's the lucky fellow?" Shifting uncomfortably on the back seat, Polly tried to avert her eyes from catching his gaze in the rearview mirror. "The trip is for a new job." "Oh, I see. Well, congratulations. Career first, romance later. That's all the rage these days with you young lot, isn't it?" The man chuckled to himself as his focus shifted back onto the road. "Something like that." Polly pulled her mobile from her flower-print cloth tote bag, desperately hoping the conversation was over. She'd spent enough time trying to justify her decision not to accept her friends' offers of setting her up on blind dates with their mates, colleagues, or the delivery guy from the local pizza restaurant. She sure didn't need a random stranger telling her lies about how fabulous it was to be in a relationship. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt, and the never-worn wedding dress to boot. Nope. All daft notions of a fairy tale ending were way, way back in her past. Her future, on the other hand, was bright. After years of volunteering in the Education and Outreach Department for the Cotswold Wildlife and Wilderness Trust, she'd finally been given the job as an Outreach and Education Officer, and Mr. Bob, who managed the programme across the Trust, had all but promised she'd be given the promotion to Project Manager at Meadowfield Nature Reserve as soon as the current holder of the role retired in 3 months' time. "Here we are, Meadowfield." The taxi driver tapped his knuckles against the side window. Looking up from her mobile, Polly slipped it back into her bag and looked out of the window. Small cottages, hugging the narrow pavements, had replaced the fields, their yellow Cotswold brickwork crowned by old thatched roofs. "Just a couple more minutes and we'll be at Pennycress Inn." The taxi slowed as the car in front turned into a side street. Great! This was it. Meadowfield, her new home for the next 3 months until she secured the promotion and was able to apply for a mortgage to buy somewhere, either in the village of Meadowfield itself or else close by. And 3 months was plenty of time for her childhood home, her grandparents' flat, to sell too. The taxi slowed to a stop in front of a large Cotswold stone building, its garden brimming with the colours of autumn. The leaves on the trees had begun to change from yellow to copper, and the border burst with the oranges and reds of chrysanthemums in full bloom. The broken pathway, meandering towards the lavender-coloured front door, added a particular charm to the property that newly laid slabs would not have. Turning in his seat, the taxi driver whistled. "What a lovely place! I think I may have just found the next spot for me and the wife's next trip." "Oh, it is beautiful." Polly had always dreamt about living in a cottage. Not that she'd ever be able to afford a place as grand as this. She'd be lucky if she could get enough from the sale of her grandparents' small 2-bed flat back home to be able to afford a bedsit in a place as idyllic as Meadowfield. Although, perhaps when she got the promotion... "Anne, would you look at that?" The taxi driver wound his window down and pointed upwards. See the animal on top of the thatched roof? What's that meant to be? I haven't got my glasses. I'm pretty sure it's a cat. Why haven't... Thinking better of asking why he hadn't been wearing his glasses while driving, she shook her head. She wasn't sure she wanted to know his answer. Besides, he'd got her here in one piece and he'd already told her when he'd first picked her up that she was his last fare of the day. I'll help you with your bags. The driver jumped out of the front seat before making his way around the back of the car. Slipping her tote bag over her shoulder, Polly opened the door and stepped outside. Pausing, she looked towards Pennycress Inn in front of her. She was early, too early to check in, but if she could just leave her suitcase and bags somewhere, she could wander into the centre of the village and explore a little, get her bearings before heading to the nature reserve tomorrow and starting her new job. Chapter 2. Dragging her old green suitcase up the step to the quaint lavender-painted door, Polly pressed the doorbell before glancing behind and watching the taxi disappearing down the road. After a few minutes, the door opened and a woman appeared, her hair escaping from a messy bun and framing her flushed face. The tips of glittery pink fairy wings were visible above her shoulders, and as she greeted Polly, she brandished a silver wand. Hi! Oh, you must be Polly Burrows, is that right? Polly blinked, before glancing at the little sign next to the front door again. Yes, it definitely read Pennycress Inn, so she was in the right place. She just hadn't been expecting to be welcomed by a life-size fairy. She cleared her throat. Hi, yes, that's me. I'm afraid I'm a little early, but I wondered if there was anywhere I could store my luggage for a few hours before I check in, please. Yes, of course. Swinging the door open wide, the woman waved her wand towards Polly's suitcase. I'll get that for you. Come on in. Thanks. Stepping inside, Polly looked around the large hallway. The dark oak floorboards were completed by gorgeous flowered wallpaper, and a large decorative staircase wound its way upwards next to the reception area. Pulling the suitcase inside, the woman closed the door before turning to Polly. I'm so sorry. I can't remember if I introduced myself or not. I'm Laura, and welcome to Pennycress Inn. Thanks. It's beautiful in here. Following her towards the large oak reception desk, tucked beneath the ornate staircase, Polly jumped aside as two children ran from the door to her right, before disappearing into the room opposite. Careful! Laura called after them. I'm going to turn them into frogs! A small girl raced after them, holding an overly bright wand with the words Happy Birthday emblazoned in the centre of the star-shaped head. That explained Laura's fancy dress outfit. Polly must have walked in on a children's birthday party. Slow down, Willow. We don't want you tripping on your birthday, do we? Laura grimaced. Coming to an abrupt halt, the small girl, Willow, turned and looked across at Laura. Sorry. That's okay. Laura glanced towards the door the girl had run out from as a woman followed her through into the hallway. Come on, Fairy Princess Willow, Laura's right. You can't be running around the inn like this. Let's go and play musical statues. I have prizes. The woman held up a bag brimming with small toys. Oh, prizes! Lowering her wand, Willow approached the woman. Can you make sure I win, Mummy? It is my birthday. Shaking her head, the woman laughed before turning to Laura and Polly. I'm so sorry. I'll try to contain the chaos. Oh, don't worry. I've arrived early, so pretend I'm not actually here. Polly smiled. By the looks of things, the inn doubled as a base for children's parties, and the last thing she wanted to do was curb any enjoyment when it was her fault she decided to get to Meadowfield so early. You may just regret saying that, the woman laughed. That's true. Laura looked at Polly. Is it okay if I call you Polly? Oh, yes, of course. Polly grinned. She had a feeling she was going to enjoy staying here. Thanks. Laura continued and waved her wand between Polly and the other woman. Polly, this is Jill. She's the genius who brings the inn's gardens to life, whatever the season. Jill, this is Polly, who will be staying with us for 3 months. That's right, isn't it? Polly nodded. Yes, all being well at least. Lovely to meet you, Polly, and welcome to Meadowfield. Stepping forward, Jill took Polly's hand in hers as her daughter, Willow, made an attempt to snatch the bag of prizes. I promise you it's not normally like this. Pennycress is usually a peaceful place to stay. Don't worry, I used to be a primary school teacher, so this is nothing. Polly waved her hand to encompass Willow, the music and shrieks wafting from the other rooms. Ha, Jill's right. I mean, we do cater for children's parties and other celebrations, but we keep those strictly for during the day. Laura smiled. Come on, Willow. Let's give Laura and our guest a bit of that peace we're talking about. Lifting the bag of prizes just out of reach above Willow's head, Jill glanced back at Polly. See you around. OK. Willow crossed her arms, almost batting herself in the face with her large wand as she did so, and watched her mum disappear through the doorway. Then, a mischievous glint in her eye, Willow pointed her wand at Laura and Polly in turn. And I turn you into frogs! Ribbit, ribbit! Laughing, Laura shook her head as Willow chased after her mum. As the music was turned up, Laura walked across to the door and quietly closed it. Sorry. Honestly, it's no problem. It's good to hear the children enjoying themselves. Polly smiled. The children hadn't been the reason she'd left teaching. It had been the politics and the never-ending tasks thrown at her, to add to the never-ending to-do list. And the fact the senior leadership team had appeared to care more about the same set of data being inputted into 5 different formats, rather than allowing her to use her time to actually plan and resource lessons she'd be presenting to the children. Sorry again for being so early. I'll get out of your hair as soon as I've sorted my bags. Not a problem, and you're very welcome to check in early. Your room is ready and waiting. Tucking her wand beneath her arm, Laura walked behind the counter. You're here for work, right? Yes, that's it. Polly grinned. It was Monday tomorrow, the start of a brand new week and the beginning of the rest of her life. I'm starting a new job just outside of Meadowfield in the morning. Oh, you must be excited. Laura dipped behind the counter, the tips of her wings just visible above the oak surface. Standing back up, she held a key in her hand. I am. It's been a long time coming and I've worked hard to be able to change careers, so, honestly, I just can't wait to get started. Polly pulled the straps of her tote bag higher up her shoulder. A career change? Laura pointed towards the stairs before lifting Polly's suitcase and beginning the ascent. That's what I did when I bought this place last year. It was the best decision I ever made, so I can empathise with you. Wow, did you? It really is gorgeous. Taking a final look around the grand hallway, Polly then followed her upstairs, running her hand along the intricately carved banister. Thanks. After walking across the landing, Laura paused before swinging a door open. Here's your room. Stepping inside, Polly took in the large mahogany 4-poster bed, the puffy cream bedding, and the beautiful rose-patterned wallpaper behind the headboard. Oh, it's just as beautiful as the rest of the place. Oh, thank you. Beaming, Laura positioned the suitcase against the wall next to the door. I'll let you get settled in. In half an hour we will have finished the party, so you're welcome to join me and Nicola, who also works here, in the kitchen for a well-earned cuppa as we recuperate. Oh, that will be lovely. Polly watched as Laura closed the door behind her, before walking towards the large window overlooking the back garden. Even though it had begun to rain, she could imagine it would be a great place to sit and enjoy a coffee in the warmer weather, and with the flower beds still teeming with seasonal flowers and greenery, she could tell Jill was a talented gardener. A large willow tree sat in the middle of the vast lawn, a wooden bench positioned perfectly to allow the canopy to keep anyone sitting beneath it dry. Maybe she could enjoy a coffee beneath it in the morning before work. It could become a tradition of hers while she stayed here. Whatever the autumn weather decided to throw at them. Slowly turning, she rummaged in her bag for her mobile, before leaning against the window ledge and bringing the phone to her ear. She'd promised her best friend and former colleague a call to tell her she'd arrived safely. Chapter 3. Polly! I was wondering when you'd call. Are you in Meadowfield? What's it like? How are you feeling about starting your job tomorrow? Quick, tell me all the details before Freddie gets back from the pub. Stacey's voice reached Polly's ear at such a speed that she was forced to take a moment to decipher the torrent of questions. Yes, I'm in Meadowfield. I've just got to the inn I'm staying at, and it looks every bit as lovely as it did online. Polly looked around the room. Maybe after a walk into the village centre, she'd treat herself to a short nap before dinner. Oh, that bed. Is that the one Mr. Bobby set you up with? Mr. Bob, yes. The Cotswolds Wildlife and Wilderness Trust are paying for me to stay here so I can be close to the reserve. Stacey always called him Mr. Bobby. Said he reminded her of an old infant teacher or somebody. Polly knew it was odd calling him Mr. Bob rather than Bob, but everyone did it. Everyone who volunteered at the trust headquarters or worked with him. She didn't like to take a guess at his age, but he was definitely from the era when calling people by their titles and surnames used to be a thing. Anyway, back to your original questions. I'm excited about starting my new job. If everyone is as lovely here as they are back at the Trust HQ I was volunteering at, then I know I don't have anything to worry about. And you've forgotten something? Another reason why this job is going to be great for you? What have I forgotten? Polly racked her brain. You mean because I don't have to deal with our wonderful head teacher any longer? Or because, hopefully, any children I meet through my new job will actually be interested in what I have to say, rather than me trying to entice them to learn about 1,000,001 things they'll never have to encounter again once they've grown up? Huh, that's rubbish. I use Pythagoras' theorem every single day of my life. Sure you do. Shaking her head, Polly grinned. Stacey might have always been a mathematics buff, but she, Polly, most definitely was not, and that was one subject she wouldn't miss teaching. You do remember it's not actually on the curriculum until secondary school, right? I know. I may be slightly exaggerating. Stacey laughed. Anyway, the beautiful and intricate subject of maths aside, there's still something else you're forgetting. The beautiful... Polly snorted. You can keep your maths, Stacey. I'll take the flora and fauna of the nature reserve over brackets and indices any day of the week. But enlighten me. What am I forgetting? Zach Sinclair. Stacey paused before adding with a dramatic flair. Your arch nemesis. The one person you'll be glad to be free of now you're no longer volunteering at the Trust's HQ. Polly shuddered. 2 words. That was all they were. But 2 words and the name of the man who was a master at getting under her skin. The king of sarcasm and making her feel as though she were 2 inches tall. The very man who had belittled her volunteering role at the Trust, time and time again, mostly just to get ahead himself. A man who had seemingly had everything passed to him on a silver plate. His job, his money, heck, probably even his good looks. Nope, he wasn't even good-looking. Not with that arched eyebrow of his and the way his lips curled in that permanent sneer. Plus the way he spoke, talking to everyone besides her with all the charm of a man on a first date, but all the intention of a measly slug. Ugh, yuck. Polly, are you still with me? Or have you been swallowed up by the daydream of you and Zach Sinclair's wedding and subsequent 84 children? What? Ugh! You're really gross, Stacey, do you know that? Polly pulled the phone away from her ear and looked suspiciously at the screen, where Stacey's name stared back at her. How did she do this? How did she read her with such accuracy? Yes, they'd worked together at the same school and in the same year group for 12 years, had shared a flat for 7 of those before Stacey had moved in with her partner, Freddie, and Polly had briefly moved in with her ex-fiancé, before then moving back into her childhood home to take care of her grandma. But that didn't explain how Stacey knew her so well. Polly couldn't read her. She shrugged. Spy camera? Secret microphone? Or maybe Stacey was just a better judge of character than she was, and Polly an open book. Uh-huh. Stacey's giggle erupted down the phone before she spoke again, her tone becoming a staged seriousness. And methinks you doth protest too much. No, just No, Zach Sinclair has made my life a living misery for the past 4 months. I most certainly will not be missing him. Polly pushed herself off the windowsill and turned to look back outside, where the thin, stringy branches of the willow tree were being pulled in all directions by the wind. It was almost as though the tree could sense this conversation was heading into tricky territory and was trying to warn her. In fact, if I'd had a moment to think about those things, I should have thrown a party just to celebrate the fact he's now out of my life for good. As soon as Stacey's guffaw met Polly's ear, she regretted ever letting the word party escape her lips. Why had she said that? Had she secretly wanted to mull over this topic for the 1000th time? Nope, she did not. She silently cursed the willow tree for not making the warning a little more obvious. "Ha, I knew it! That fateful night is still on your mind," Stacey said between fits of laughter. "Stop it! It is not! You know I wish it had never happened." Polly traced the pad of her forefinger across her lips. Her leaving party, a night she'd supposed to have spent celebrating the end of her old teaching career and the beginning of a new one at Meadowfield Nature Reserve, the job she'd be starting tomorrow. And she knew exactly what Stacey was referring to. That 2-second snog she and Zach had shared 4 whole months ago. A moment of drunken madness that she'd regretted ever since. And the moment things had changed between her and Zach. She'd noticed the difference the first time she'd seen him after the party. That first day back at the Trust headquarters, where she'd continued to volunteer until her new position here in Meadowfield began. He'd been different with her. Aloof, sarcastic, all the damning characteristics she now described him as having, whereas before she'd been shown the charming, friendly side of his personality, the side he portrayed to others. Besides, you're making it sound as though it was something more than it was. It was just a kiss. A measly, tiny, short-lived kiss. Uh-huh. It was, and you know it. Yes, it had been nice, and yes, even though she'd rather pull her teeth out than admit it, that evening, in that moment, she'd let herself think there might just be more to it than there had been. But Stacey would be the last person she'd admit that to. "Oh, I'm sure he'll be missing you just as much as you'll miss him," Stacey continued, her voice laced with sarcasm. "And what's that supposed to mean?" She'd never outwardly retaliated to his indifference, and she'd never spoken to him about the kiss they'd shared either. They were both adults, and she'd got the message he wasn't interested loud and clear. Yes, she'd said a few choice words in her head when he'd said something to suck up to the management, not that he needed to, not with his parents being huge benefactors to the Trust, up until a year ago anyway, when that had stopped for some reason, perhaps because they felt, with their son working there, they were still contributing without dipping into their bottomless pockets. But she'd always maintained her professional, friendly persona around everyone she'd worked with, whether or not she'd liked them. A skill she'd perfected whilst teaching at Daisy Chain Primary and answering to Mrs. Jedd, the head teacher. "Nothing, just that—" The phone line became muffled before Stacey's voice returned. "Sorry, I'm going to have to run. Freddie's back and he's a bit worse for wear. I believe a long liquid lunch has been had." "No worries. Speak to you soon." "Yes, ring me tomorrow. I want to hear all about your first day at the office." Stacey paused before whispering loudly. "I'll leave you with 2 words before I go, though. Leaving party." "Oh, don't." Too late. The phone line was silent. Stacey had gone. Taking a deep breath, Polly pushed all thoughts of Zach Sinclair from her mind. He was in her past, and she was now focusing on her future. Polly threw her mobile onto the bed, the device bouncing on the spongy mattress. Now, that looked good. She'd have just 5 minutes, maybe 10, before she went out exploring. After all, what with saying goodbye for now to her little home and the train and taxi ride, it had been a long, emotional and exhausting day. Throwing herself down next to her mobile, she sank into the puffy duvet and closed her eyes, the faint tune of Happy Birthday from the children's party below, lulling her to sleep. Chapter 4. Letting the glass door of the large visitor centre, positioned on the edge of Meadowfield Nature Reserve, close behind her, Polly slipped off her coat and pulled at the hem of her pale blue shirt. She hadn't known what to wear. As a volunteer, she'd always rocked up in jeans and an old jumper, but now she was an employee. She wanted to make the right impression. Polly looked around. The vast foyer was largely unused by the looks of things, more a sad corridor leading to the cluster of visitor toilets at the far end. Someone had tacked tired-looking photographs of the reserve to the walls, a couple of feet apart. The curling edges of the information guides beneath told stories of its history. It didn't look particularly engaging to her, someone who was interested in conservation, so she could only hazard a guess that the normal day-to-day visitor strode right past, ignoring them at best and not even noticing them at worst, on their way to relieve themselves after the picnic lunch they'd brought with them. Or maybe not. She glanced back out of the large windows surrounding the double doors as rain lashed against the glass. There'd be no picnics here for a while, not with this weather. Looking around, she noticed 2 doors leading off the foyer. One labelled classroom, the other officers. That's where she'd be going then, to the officers. Now she was here, all the excitement which had been building up to this day had suddenly disappeared and instead been replaced with cold fear. What if she didn't fit in? She wasn't local after all. What if her new colleagues didn't believe she could do a decent job because she didn't know the area? Being local would definitely be an advantage in a role like this. Or what if they just didn't think she was likeable? Even Stacey had once admitted it had taken a while to warm to her. Polly had tried hard over the years to be more assertive, less shy, but she knew she still had a long way to go. She knew people still came to the conclusion that she was standoffish, even though that was the furthest from the truth. Apart from with Stacey and a couple of old school friends, she'd never felt anything like confident with her peers. Turning back towards the door, she took a deep breath, hoping the sight of the trees circling the car park, the rain and the general ambience of the nature reserve would go some way to steadying her nerves. Today was a big deal. She couldn't pretend it wasn't. After all, if her new colleagues didn't like her, didn't gel with her, or came to the conclusion that she was incompetent, then the promotion might just be less of a given than Mr. Bob had promised her. But she was here now. She was on the first step of her new journey, and she was damn well going to do her best to make a good impression. Fixing a smile to her face, Polly turned back around and made her way towards the office door, before rapping her knuckles against the wood. "Hello?" A man sporting a dark green short-sleeved polo shirt, despite the chill in the air, a brush of a white beard and the greenest eyes she'd ever seen, pulled the door open and stood in the doorway, his large frame almost reaching from one side of the doorframe to the other. "Hi, Declan, is it? I'm Polly Burrows. I'm your new recruit." Trying to feign an air of confidence, Polly stuck her hand out, grateful when the older man took it. At least he was wearing a name badge with his title of project manager written beneath. It was a good start that she didn't have to flounder and try to work out if he was her new boss or not. He was. "Polly! Fantastic to meet you. Come on through. We're all excited to have you join our small team. We're small but mighty, eh?" After closing the door again, Declan had his arms out wide to encompass the room. The one person sitting at her desk, turning and grinning at him. "Oh, yes, we are. Oh, that's what we tell ourselves." Pushing her wheeled chair back, a woman with jet black hair stood up and walked towards them. "Hi, Polly. I'm Vicky. I'm the program assistant around here, so any admin jobs you need doing, just shout." "Great, thanks." Shaking Vicky's hand, Polly frowned as something bubbled beneath the sleeve of the woman's dark green sweatshirt. "Have you got something in your sleeve? It's moving." "Oh, that'll be Rolo." Vicky held open the cuff of her sleeve as a small brown rat poked its nose out. "It's a rat!" Polly swallowed. She wasn't sure what she'd been expecting, but it definitely hadn't been that. "Vicky here volunteers at a wildlife rescue centre in her spare time. Not sure how she does it, but she's always bringing in some sort of creature or other, aren't you, Vicky?" Declan gently stroked the rat's nose before it disappeared back up her sleeve. "I do. This little one is only a baby. He was abandoned by his mother, so is being hand-reared. Vicky laughed as Rolo continued to make his way up her arm before peeping out of her collar. He's such a sweet character. That's what you say about all the waifs and strays you bring in, Declan chided. Well, they are. Vicky shrugged before turning back to Polly and flicked her hair dramatically as she grinned. As I said, I'm queen of the admin, although there is only one of me for the entire team, but I'll do my best to support you where I can. Great, thanks. Polly smiled as Vicky turned and flourished her arm towards her desk in the corner. An array of photographs of various animals crammed across the surface, with minimal space left for her laptop, which peeped amongst the clusters of frames. Turning back, Vicky pointed towards 2 empty desks, sitting side by side at the far end of the large room. Over there are Dennis and Art. They're out at the moment, but Art is the Outreach and Education Officer and Dennis the Community Engagement Officer. They'll be back at lunch, so you'll catch them then. Polly blinked. Had she heard that right? Had Vicky said Art was the Outreach and Education Officer? Did that mean there were going to be 2 of them? She'd been told her job was to fill a gap, and given the nature reserve wasn't particularly large, she'd assumed she'd be the only one. Unless Art was here to show her the ropes and would then be leaving. Yes, that seemed likely. The Ranger Harold will be pottering about somewhere, Vicky continued, not once letting her cheery smile slip. Sorry, can I just check that you said Art was an Outreach and Education Officer? Polly glanced back towards the desks at the far end of the office, as if half expecting him to appear on command. Yes, that's right. Vicky nodded, before leading the way towards the other end of the office, where 2 more empty desks sat. And this is your desk right here. Well, either of them, to be honest. You're the first newbie to arrive, so you can have first dibs. Polly glanced between the 2 empty desks and Art's desk. Wouldn't it make more sense for her and Art to sit together? It seems slightly daft to have the 2 of them located at opposite ends of the office if he was going to be training her up. Which would you like? I'd choose quickly if I were you. Your colleague might arrive at any point. Then you'll be left with no choice. Vicky laughed, her delicate voice taking on the sound of a hyena. Polly shrugged, before placing her handbag on the desk, closest to where she was standing. Both desks were centred in the middle of a large window overlooking the nature reserve, although it looked as though the view from the other desk would be hindered slightly by a large shed-like structure. She felt a little bad for taking the desk with the best view, but she figured she'd worked long and hard for this opportunity and given up a ton of stuff too. Besides, as Vicky had said, she was here first. Good choice. Vicky grinned before pointing towards an open door, revealing a small kitchen leading off from the end of the office. I'll let you get settled in. Would you like a coffee? Oh, I'd love one, please. Polly smiled. She wasn't too sure she actually had room for a drink after the delicious breakfast of cinnamon-sprinkled French toast and filter coffee she'd enjoyed at the inn this morning, but she didn't want to offend her new colleague. Great, I'm parched. I ran out of the door without even attempting to make one this morning. Milk? Sugar? Milk, 1 sugar, please. Coming right up. Vicky began to walk towards the kitchen before calling back over her shoulder. Declan, do you want a cuppa? As he answered, Polly wheeled her chair out from beneath the desk before sitting down. Swinging it gently from side to side, she grinned. She could get used to this comfort. It certainly beat sitting on hard miniature plastic chairs in the classroom. Pulling herself towards her desk, she rested her elbows on the pine surface and cupped her chin in her hands. The view was stunning. From here, she could see a narrow gravel pathway winding its way towards a little bridge over a stream to lead the way into the midst of the nature reserve. Trees hugged the pathway, birds fluttering from branch to branch as though on some secret mission or other. Perfect. It may have taken 5 years of dedication, 5 years of juggling teaching with volunteering, but it had been worth it. She was out of the classroom, but still able to work in her field of expertise and passion, teaching. What could be more perfect than mixing educating with nature? Yep, she had her dream job, Outreach and Education Officer. She might be new to the nature reserve and Meadowfield itself, but she wasn't new to her position and what would be expected of her. She'd volunteered for 5 years assisting in the role. She could do this, and she couldn't wait to get started. Tearing her eyes from the idyllic view, she began to unpack her tote bag. She hadn't really known what would be provided and what wouldn't, so she'd bought a new notebook and pen set for the occasion, just to have something she could take notes in before getting to grips with where stock was kept and before she got the laptop the trust would provide. She'd also brought the photo frame holding an image of her and her grandparents, the one which had taken pride of place on her desk in the classroom for 12 years and would now take pride of place on her desk here. 3 months of being dedicated to the job in hand, and she'd promoted to project manager, which is what she needed if she were to be able to make ends meet and settle in this part of the Cotswolds. Next, she pulled her mobile from her bag and grinned as she spotted a missed call from the estate agent. This might be just the news she'd been waiting for. Her grandparents' flat, which she'd been struggling to sell for months now, ever since she'd been offered this job, might just have had an offer. She hadn't heard about any viewings, but she'd been out all day Saturday and, of course, travelling here to Meadowfield yesterday, so perhaps David, the estate agent, had shown someone round on Saturday. She'd given the agency the key after all. Everything was coming together. After months of uncertainty and living off savings, things were on the road to aligning. Here you go, Polly. 1 coffee with sugar and milk. Vicky slid a large green mug onto her desk before hitching her thumb behind her. You're being summoned to the meeting room. I think the other newbie has finally arrived and Declan wants to speak to you both. Oh, great. Thanks for this. Nodding towards the mug, Polly slipped her mobile back into her bag and stood up. She'd ring the estate agent back when she had a spare moment. Picking up her heavy mug, she headed towards another door next to the small kitchen, which she hadn't actually noticed until Vicky had pointed it out. Chapter 5. With the large mug in one hand, Polly tapped on the door with the other and lifted the mug to her lips. She frowned as a dribble of coffee ran over the rim and settled down the front of her shirt. Taking a quick sip, Polly lowered the mug again and brushed at the droplets of coffee, the brown liquid forming a smudge which closely imitated one of those ink pictures promising to reveal secret childhood trauma or such you see on some social media quizzes. Typical. Come in! Declan's cheerful voice sounded through the thin door. After a final attempt at soaking up the coffee stain with a tissue from her pocket, Polly shoved the tissue back and opened the door. A large, very well-used pine table sat in the middle of a white-walled plain room, which was barely bigger than the table itself. Squashed at one end stood a sizable flipboard and a tiny table housing a kettle and jug of water in the corner. Declan was sitting at the far side of the table, papers in front of him and a grin spread across his face, whilst a man was sitting with his back towards her, presumably the other new addition to the team. That's it, pull up a chair. I'd like you to meet our other new team member. Declan indicated the chair next to the man. As Polly approached the table, the man stood up and slowly turned around. When she saw his face, she halted. Her pulse quickened and her stomach churned, threatening to exhume the lovely breakfast she'd gobbled down a couple of hours ago. Of all the people. Polly Burrows. He uttered her name almost before he turned, with his hand held midway in the air, ready to offer a handshake. Pausing for a millisecond before realising she wasn't holding hers out. The man lowered it as his steely blue eyes narrowed. Zach Sinclair. She spat the words through her clenched jaw, her grip tightening on the handle of the mug. This couldn't be happening. The one person she'd been glad to see the back of, no, the one person she'd been overjoyed to be leaving behind her, was here, and he was joining the team. You do know each other? Declan slapped his forehead jovially. Of course you do. You were both working at headquarters. I was working. Miss Burrows was volunteering. The coldness seeping into Zach's voice was unmistakable as he sat back down, minus the handshake. Yes, well, we're all the same here at the Trust. Workers, volunteers, we're all colleagues. Declan indicated the chair next to Zack again. Polly slipped into it and placed her mug carefully on the table, before shifting the chair along, as far away from Zack as she could without appearing rude. With her heart racing, she clasped her hands around the mug, hoping the warmth of the coffee would calm her. It didn't matter if he was here. It was still her new start, the beginning of her career with the Trust, and she wasn't about to let his presence put a dampener on that. Lifting the mug to her lips, she took a long, shuddery breath, hoping no one would see how off-kilter his presence had made her. I would like to formally welcome you both to the team. Declan shuffled the pile of papers in front of him before pulling 2 out and sliding them across the table towards Polly and Zack. Now, I know you've both already signed contracts for a temporary position here, but these are to outline your allocated positions and job descriptions, so if you wouldn't mind signing these, we can then get on with the other nitty-gritty admin stuff before Harold takes you for a tour of our wonderful reserve. Thanks. Taking the contract, Polly looked down and blinked, willing her eyes to focus instead of being tempted to glance in Zack's direction. Temporary? She didn't remember Mr. Bob telling her it was temporary. And she was sure the contract she had already signed hadn't stated anything to that effect. She shrugged. He must mean temporary until the promotion. That made sense. I hate to be this guy, but there's a typo. I'm here for the role of Communications and Marketing Officer, not Fundraising and Development. Zack turned his contract around and pushed it back across the table towards Declan. He hated to be that guy. Polly swallowed a snigger. In the 2 years she'd known and tolerated Zack's presence, she'd learned one thing about him, and that was that he always wanted to be that guy. There was nothing he loved more than to point out someone else's mistake and take advantage of it any way he could. She looked down at her contract. No, she wasn't being fair. She was letting her feelings about the kiss and the subsequent events cloud her. He was thorough, yes, but he didn't really enjoy getting one up on someone, even if it had felt that way since the night of the party. No mistake. We have had a recent shuffle around here at the reserve, and we have that position covered already. Declan slid the paper back across the table as he smiled kindly. Zack tapped the contract with the tip of his pen. That's not the position I applied for. Oh, I'm sorry, but I'm afraid that's the position we have to fill. I think there must have been a misunderstanding in communication between us and HQ. Stealing a glance at Zack, Polly picked up her mug in an attempt to hide the small twitch of her lips as she struggled not to smile. Serves you right, Zachary Sinclair. Maybe you can leave now? But fundraising isn't my specialism. I've worked in marketing for corporate organisations for years. That's what I do. Leaning forward in his chair, Zack frowned. Holding his hands out, palms up, Declan raised his eyebrows. I apologise for any misunderstanding. You're both here to be our fundraising and development gurus. We're having a little trouble with funds at the moment and need fresh eyes. Both here to be fundraising and development gurus? Both? Her and Zack? Zack and her? What? No. Lowering the heavy mug with a bang, Polly watched in dismay as the now tepid liquid rolled down the edge of the ceramic before pooling on the pine table and making its way towards the paper in front of her. Swallowing, she cleared her throat, her voice coming out as a squeak. I was told I would be working in outreach and education. Looking from Polly to Zack and back again, Declan pulled the contracts back towards him, waving hers in the air in an attempt to dispel the coffee. Taking his glasses from their spot tucked beneath his beard in the collar of his polo shirt, he placed them at the end of his nose and looked at the contracts again. Tapping his finger against the paper, he then looked back up. I fear there must have been quite the communication error if you were both informed of the wrong job titles. We do have Art and Dennis who, although relatively new to their current roles, are working very well as outreach and education and communications and marketing officers. I couldn't possibly ask them to shuffle around again. Polly glanced towards Zack, who ran his fingers through his dark, glossy hair before slumping back in his chair. Wasn't he going to question Declan's decision? Insist he retract the job offer and instead offer them both, or him, the role which had been promised? Polly cleared her throat. I'm not sure if you know my employment history. I was a teacher and have volunteered in the outreach and education sector of the Trust for the past 5 years. Declan nodded. Yes, Mr. Bob passed across both of your CVs. Most excellent, both of them, but it doesn't change the fact that the positions we have available are for fundraising and development officers. 2 of them. Now, I can see what a shock this must be to you both, particularly when you have been promised entirely different roles, but in all honesty, I think this could work to our advantage and yours. How so? Zack shook his head. Disbelief etched across his features. Leaning forward, Declan smiled. Because you're precisely what we need, both of you. This nature reserve is quite frankly on its knees with regard to funds. We have a wealth of wildlife. We have enrichment opportunities and rewilding projects ready to go. The only thing we lack is funding. But we've already established that's not in either of our backgrounds. Zack straightened his back. Precisely. Over the years we've had experienced fundraisers come and go, but there's one thing they lacked, and I just think you both might be able to provide it. Declan wagged his finger at them. What is it? Polly frowned. A fresh pair of eyes. Declan pointed his finger first at Polly and then at Zack. Or in this case, 2 fresh pairs of eyes. You're coming into the job with no expectations. You're not going to spout to me that this or that fundraising tactic worked at a reserve down in Devon or up in Cumbria and so will work here. We've been there, tried that. Meadowfield Nature Reserve will be a clean slate to you. Polly stuttered before falling silent again. Her head was whirring. How was she supposed to take on a job which she had 0 experience in? Especially for the trust which had taken a chance on her, the trust which she wanted to do her best by. And another thing. We've been burnt. We've had people come and go quicker than a yo-yo. We need people with passion who understand how these things work at a place like ours. Yes, we're not huge. We're not offering anything particularly exciting here at Meadowfield Nature Reserve. But what we are offering, a sanctuary for both wildlife and locals alike, is special. We need people to come in and see what we're missing.